Before I get started here with today's video, I wanted to let you know that I'm going to be using footage that's all captured off of a standard Sony PS4 running into an Elgato. All of this is captured at 1080p, 60 frames a second. If it doesn't look that way, I promise it's not my equipment, it's just the way this game is. Borderlands 3 is in kind of a weird place. The game is a testament to everything so very right with the game, while simultaneously being one of the most infuriating and upsetting experiences in this console generation. At its core, Borderlands 3 is an incredibly competent game. The Vault Hunters this time around all feel really good and have distinct, engaging personalities, and with the addition of multiple action skills, they feel more versatile and flexible than they ever have before. The main draw of Borderlands, the guns, are on full display here as well. The addition of more permutations and a longer list of parts, the sheer number of powerful weapon types with exceedingly unique effects and powers feel just that, unique and powerful. The main loop of a Borderlands game has never been as potent and satisfying as it is here, but unfortunately, Borderlands 3 is very far from perfect.
It's not me, it's you. Yeah, the more I think about it, it's definitely you.
I wish with all of my heart that I could disconnect from its issues, allowing myself to lean into the core gameplay loop, but I just can't. I can't look past the egregious performance issues, the outrageous decisions made by the developers, and more importantly, the seemingly self-defeating approach that it's seeming to take towards its core audience. But at the same time, I can't make myself hate it. I can't honestly sit down and say, I don't want to play this game, it's a bad game, because it isn't. It isn't a bad game, and I do want to play it. But this duality makes me feel like the issues of this game aren't the game's fault, but only exist because of the game and the problems that it has. Let me explain. Let me start with how this game actively defeats itself, and say right off the bat that Borderlands as a series has never been the most explicitly challenging shooter, electing to focus on fun factor over pucker factor. Rushing through the main story the first time through grants you access to a new modifier system called Mayhem mode. Mayhem isn't too dissimilar in concept from something like the Torment levels in Diablo 3, but is way different in the level of success that it achieves. Mayhem has 3 levels, with each increase in difficulty offering better loot, cash, and iridium drops, which is really great. But what's not really great is Mayhem's mode reliance on a randomized, inconsistent difficulty model. Instead of linearly scaling enemies and their difficulty with Mayhem levels, the game relies on a swath of randomized modifiers that can completely make or break your experience. These can range anywhere from reducing weapon damage to reducing specific elemental damage to reducing your shield recharge time.
It's time to
Stop. Do you see the problem here? Every single one of these modifiers is a nerf to the player. Sure, there are some modifiers that buff you, but a majority of them are not designed this way, electing instead to do more damage than good, actively hamstringing the player and forcing their builds and guns into irrelevancy while actively making enemies more dangerous. These modifiers rotate every time you enter a new area of the map, which leads to this really strange priority of instantly checking my modifiers whenever I load into a zone to see how much or how little I'm about to struggle with what I'm trying to get done. As much as I hate the phrase artificial difficulty, it pretty much perfectly describes what's happening here. Mayhem mode isn't hard because your build isn't strong or you don't have good weapons. It's hard because sometimes you just have bad luck and you get modifiers that reduce your capabilities across the board so heavily that you basically do nothing. But the flip side to this is that sometimes you'll get insanely lucky and you'll get the few modifiers that do buff you strongly all stacked together at once. This makes the game swing so easily from impossibly difficult to insufferably easy that it's almost not worth doing. This random coin toss of difficulty is so frustrating, and it seems really poorly designed at very best, and it doesn't allow players to engage with the game at the level of difficulty that they want to. To me, it would make more sense to put more engaging and fun-based modifiers into the game that don't directly nerf or buff players or enemies. Instead, use Mayhem mode to linearly scale enemy health, damage, and loot drops. and use modifiers that augment the gameplay in interesting ways instead of directly changing the player agency. Some random things I could think of would be enemies moving faster as they lose health, enemies only being able to be damaged by critical hits but they take extra critical hit damage, or maybe even something just as simple as removing ammo drops from the world, forcing players to be smarter and savvier with their bullets between vending machine checkpoints. Now these are just random suggestions, but I feel like those are already way more well conceived than a lot of what the game has to offer now. There's very little sense in allowing players to invest 40 plus hours into 2 playthroughs of your campaign and build insanely powerful characters and gather awesome guns only to make them feel irrelevant and completely powerless by a literal roll of a die. Performance-wise, Borderlands 3 is a completely mixed bag. Frustratingly, performance seems to vary pretty widely from player to player. Everything from audio glitches, horrible frame rate drops, stuttering, map and menu lag, and the list goes on. I experience these issues at a much higher rate when playing in multiplayer settings with friends, but that's comprised probably 70% of the time I've spent in the game so far. I've heard that these issues are especially disruptive when playing on split screen, which is a standby of the Borderlands series, but I have no friends and haven't tested this myself. These performance issues leave a lot to be desired, especially since the game has feasibly been in development since the final stages of Battleborn, which released in May of 2016. Now, I'm not saying that time is the only solution, but it makes me wonder how rough the development cycle could have been if the game released in a state like this. It makes it very hard to enjoy a game about over-the-top action when the game stutters every time I use a skill. It's frustrating to deal with these frame drops and glitches, and it can very easily sour an experience that's built for fast-paced fun. At the end of the day, that's what Borderlands has always been known for, over-the-top chaos and fun. Everything from the writing to the characters to the weapon designs and abilities haven't always been 100% fair and balanced, but they have always been fun. This game is no exception, but this time around something fundamental to the soul of this series has changed. People still play Borderlands 2 to this day over 7 years later because they can log in and feel incredibly powerful with their ludicrous overblown builds. Gearbox made changes to the things that were very busted and completely broke Borderlands 2, but they rarely, if ever, changed the balance of the game for the sake of making things feel fair. Not even a month in, Gearbox has released a balance patch and several hotfixes that address buffing and nerfing characters, and even one that throttled XP gains and drop rates for high-end items. But they've yet to release a single patch or hotfix that addresses these horrible performance issues that are plaguing this game. This time around, Gearbox seems to be less interested in player agency and having a fun and stable game, and more interested in making sure that each Vault Hunter feels balanced and fair. I've seen a lot of people on Gearbox's Twitter and the Borderlands 3 subreddit somehow supporting this, with the most common excuse being, the game isn't fun if you're too powerful. To that, I really only have one response. If you feel that way, you're playing the wrong fucking game. Borderlands is a purely PvE experience, and there is zero place for a game like this for nerfing builds and making things feel less powerful. I can understand wanting to make each Vault Hunter feel viable, and I truly don't have a problem with that, but instead of crushing powerful characters down, the developers should just bring the weak ones up to a higher level. The issue with that, though, is baked right into the cake here. A couple of these characters, like the fan-favorite Flak, have an insanely powerful build that can nearly trivialize all content with the right weapons and skills because of the way that they're designed, while Zane struggles to even keep up because he doesn't have the same power level built into his skills as the other Vault Hunters. Zane has been buffed once since launch, and it definitely helped him out, but at the same time, they decided to reduce the power of Flak's build simultaneously. This doesn't make Zane feel better, it makes Flak feel worse and still doesn't close the gap between them. At the time of writing this script, a good portion of Zane's abilities have been discovered to actually not even function and provide no effect when they are equipped and used. But instead of fixing these issues and addressing that concern, Gearbox has nerfed Flak's very popular critical hit focused build a tiny bit with every single hotfix that they've put into the game since day one. Prioritizing balance over performance is a sure path to creating a frustrated player base in a game with very low longevity. Borderlands has always leaned into the philosophy of everything is balanced if everything is overpowered, but this time something feels wrong. It seems like the team is reaching for a more live service-like model of patching and balancing, even though a system like that makes very little sense for a title like Borderlands 3. Players of this game are often fiercely loyal to whatever character they identified with, and will often insist on playing them as much as they can no matter what. For me, it's Amara. I've always played the Siren in the Borderlands games, and the Sirens have always been generally very strong, and thankfully that's true in this game too. Amara has two builds that are very, very good, and they tend to stay very good no matter what modifiers you get, unless you get super unlucky. But what if Amara had been really bad? What if her skills were no fun and they didn't allow me to clear content efficiently and quickly? What if they decide that she's too strong and they nerf her into oblivion like they seem to be stepping down the path for Flak right now? I would be forced to engage this game in a way that I don't want to in order to progress and have fun. Why? Why would you actively choose to remove agency and fun factor from your players in a game that's devoted to having as much fun as possible? Now, don't get me wrong, Borderlands 3 does a lot right. The game is absolutely gorgeous, and it's also just a lot of fun to run around various planets with a party of friends, completing missions and fighting a wide array of enemies. The weapons look and feel and sound so much better than ever before, and the skills are varied and very engaging. The story is passable, albeit a bit polarizing, and it definitely is much larger in scope this time around, spanning several planets that all feel different and frankly really goddamn cool. Most of the characters are great, and the Vault Hunters are a very cool bunch this time around, at least in design and aesthetics. I really do love so much about this game. Perhaps the best of all is Gearbox and 2K sticking to their guns on consumer-friendly packages. This game has no loot boxes and no Fortnite Season Pass. Regular updates are going to be released for free, with free events happening, one actually coming up at the end of this month. Large expansions will be a one-time purchase at a reasonable price, probably 15 or 20 bucks if we go off the previous Borderlands titles. But for everything that this game does right, there's this unshakable feeling of something not being quite up to snuff. Something about this game's issues makes it feel like this cake needed about 2 or 3 more months in the oven, and right now we're just playing a really strange beta test. It doesn't feel like a finished product. But most importantly, the way the game is being treated by the development team makes it feel like it isn't being respected as a title in the Borderlands series. These issues can definitely be fixed via stability and improvement patches, and I'm sure that they will be, but why are balance changes taking precedent over performance optimizations and bug and glitch fixes? At the end of the day, the question really is simply, will it be too little too late? Will the damage be done before the solutions are ready? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Thanks so much for coming by and checking out my opinion on Borderlands 3. Leave a comment below letting me know what you think, and if you have anything that you wanted to add and maybe I missed. Make sure that you like and subscribe, and if you want to, share this video to your friends. See you guys around, and stay rad.